We now return to our top story of Ukrainian President Zelenskyy's peace plan. Joining me is an eminent guest, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, former senior diplomat. Good evening and welcome, sir. Your thoughts on the peace plan that has come in. While Zelenskyy agrees to cede territories to Russia, how realistic are the expectations of the recognition of the membership of NATO that he's seeking?
Thank you very much for having me. I'll come to NATO in a minute, but I think the statement made by President of Ukraine, Zelenskyy, needs to be seen against the backdrop of the imminent assumption of the presidential office by Trump in the United States.
Right.
Second, the fact that Ukraine is losing on the battleground. And third, I think he is preparing the ground by showing some flexibility. It cannot be denied that Zelenskyy has shown flexibility by saying for the first time ever that he will not recuperate the territories from Russia and those territories can be kept by Russia, but that he will then regain it through a diplomatic solution over the long term. So that is the first point I'd like to make. The second point I'd like to make with regard to your point about NATO, very briefly, this is dead on arrival because Putin has invaded Ukraine precisely to forestall the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO. So there is no way this is going to fly, and I think this is kite flying on the part of Zelenskyy just to muddy the waters, but there is absolutely no way in which this proposal will be acceptable to Russia, especially now that it is winning the battle.
And so where do you see NATO positioned in this conflict now? It says there is no consensus for Ukraine's immediate membership, but also, as you mentioned, the great deal of uncertainty that comes in with the upcoming presidency of President-elect Donald Trump in the US. Where does this grouping stand as we speak?
I think NATO will be frankly more concerned about its own existence over the medium to long term. I mean, one has only to look at the article penned by Lieutenant General Kellogg, who's now the special envoy for Ukraine, appointed by Trump. And he wrote this article in April of 2024, that is this year. He makes it abundantly clear that US must propose to Putin that Ukraine cannot be joining NATO and the membership of Ukraine to NATO will be put off. There is yet another report in an American paper which says that while Trump will not remove the US or withdraw the US from NATO, he will certainly do two things. One, get the NATO members to pay more so that they can fulfill the 2% of the GDP yardstick that has been kept by NATO. Secondly, while he will be willing to maintain the nuclear umbrella of NATO over Europe, I think it is now clear that America is not going to put boots on the ground. They are not going to be able to provide in an indefinite period shells and artillery and so on. Those things will have to be done by the Europeans themselves. So there is going to be a complete reorientation of NATO under Trump. And I think the Europeans know it, and the Europeans, some of them may welcome it, others will simply have to accept it as a fait accompli.
Ambassador Kumar, in the past few days, we've seen new escalations in this conflict with Ukraine using, for a brief while, US and West supplied long-range weapons. And President Putin also presents his revised nuclear doctrine. And then today we're talking about the new peace plan. This flip-flop that we're looking at this stage. How would Russia, President Putin, be looking at these developments?
No, that shouldn't surprise you. What happens is, before the actual negotiations commence, and it is clear to everybody that negotiations will happen beginning of next year, and this is something that has been accepted implicitly by both Putin and Zelenskyy, each side wants to make a last-ditch effort on the battleground to occupy the moral advantage or the serious advantage so that they can then negotiate with the other party from a position of strength. That is what Russia and Ukraine are doing, but it should be clear to anybody that it is Russia which is winning the battle, not Ukraine. Ukraine can blame it on lack of weaponry, etc. But the fact is, Ukraine really upped the ante by using the anti-tank missiles which have been provided by the United States. And what Russia has done is quite remarkable. These hypersonic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, can actually hit anywhere in Europe. And they have proved this by test firing this missile to hit a target in Ukraine. But this is clear escalation before Trump occupies the presidency. So I see it as brinkmanship, but I think what we have to be vigilant is that brinkmanship can very easily lead to something like a World War III. I don't want to exaggerate the possibility of it, but I think we should be vigilant. Right now, it is brinkmanship by both sides to have the upper hand when negotiations start next year.
And just to add to that, Ambassador, NATO, we understand, has been heavily invested into this conflict without being a direct party to it. But is it also now approaching, analyzing this conflict almost independent of Ukraine? The German Chancellor speaking to President Putin directly, even while Ukrainian President saying it is like opening a Pandora's box, a case in point.
You are absolutely spot on. I think there is a lot of introspection in the major European powers. There is a lot of introspection on NATO's own part. And as I said earlier, NATO will be interested in its own self-preservation. And if it means it has to sacrifice Ukraine in the process, it will willingly do it. I have absolutely no doubt that NATO wants to preserve its own position, and they will then have to make the necessary compromises, and Ukraine may just become collateral damage in the process.
And in such circumstances, given that his allies and adversaries both are in play, who can President Zelenskyy rely on, and to what extent?
I think that's a difficult question, frankly, because this is the maximum that the Western alliance can do for Zelenskyy. Zelenskyy has got the missiles, the long-term missiles he wanted. He has got the authority to strike deep inside Russia. Russia, in response, has retaliated with intercontinental ballistic missiles, telling Zelenskyy, you do it again, we will now hit parts of Europe. There has been a lowering of threshold of the nuclear doctrine by Russia, which is very serious. So I really am hard put to answer your question as to where Zelenskyy can turn, which is why I think Zelenskyy is talking peace. This is the first time Zelenskyy has talked peace. This is the first time he has admitted that he may not be able to get back all the territories that belong to Ukraine. In response, I think he is still trying to hang on to the NATO thing. But I don't think, as I said, it's a non-starter, because that is originally the reason why Russia invaded Ukraine. So I don't think, as what I'm trying to say is, it is Ukraine's possible NATO membership that was the casus belli on which Russia intervened in Ukraine. So you cannot really go back to Putin now and say, you please accept it and Ukraine will be part of NATO. It's simply dead on arrival.
Right. And finally, Ambassador Kumar, when this conflict ends and how it ends will have the potential to reshape geopolitics of the region and the world.
Absolutely. I think in the first instance, it will reshape the security architecture in Europe. My sense is that Russia will have to be part of that security architecture. If you do not include Russia as part of that security architecture in Europe, it will again just be a freezing of the conflict, and the conflict will again erupt in 2 to 3 years' time. So I think Trump and his colleagues will have to take a long and hard look at what are Russia's legitimate security interests. As the point has been made by a number of people, will United States accept that missiles are placed by Russia either in Mexico or in Canada? Obviously not. So I think somebody will have to take a good look at what is Russia's reasonable security interest and try to understand and meet that interest. It is only then that you can have and you can construct a stable security architecture in Europe.
Ambassador Mohan Kumar, appreciate you joining us on the News Hour and sharing your perspective.